Sup, my fellas. Don't forget to leave feedback and enjoy the story. Of course, we have a world that is exactly different from the planet Earth, the Earth of Theranor. The prophecy there says that when the Emperor's heart is laid down, someone who has bypassed fate will arrive in these lands. It was this prophecy that spoke of a certain super being. The ruler of the Lasclan Empire, Lasclan even sacrificed many of his close friends, children, to summon this otherworldly deity. But the Emperor called an ordinary guy, and because of his anger, he found himself all alone on a land that he had not published at all. In front of us is the Lasclan Palace Lasclan, where our character continued to fight. Against a huge serpent, he used his mighty sword, as well as the ability, Rumble of Mountains. In addition to the scary creatures, there was also the king himself, who summoned our protagonist, who simply did not believe that his creatures were dealt with so quickly. But our son Shihan said that such things were not a problem for him, because he was also a summoned. The powerful ability to summon creatures from another world caused many deaths. Many people simply suffered because of tyranny. So it is such an emperor who is not worthy to live. Our Shihan just managed to barely escape and reappear in the palace after 3 years. He lived absolute every day in the hope of raising his sword over the emperor's head. So it was at that moment that our main character's eyes just lit up. He said that now he will pay back the debt, as well as the pain for all his dead comrades. The emperor shouted, because if it wasn't for this damned prophecy, then he would definitely have mastered and continued his rule. The emperor was killed, but behind our protagonist came up to his friend. Her name was Lavina, which he was glad. She was congratulating Shihan on his victory. The two characters hugged each other tightly, after which another character appeared, who checked the emperor's body and expressed his opinion about the whole situation. He said that our character turns out to be much more capable than it seems. This person's name was Lilstay, but others started coming up and they started discussing the emperor's death. Lavina immediately went up to her hero of life and asked him if he really didn't want to go home. But of course, our protagonist has already come to his conclusion. He said that he decided everything. Because if he says that he will not say, then he will lie. But he simply does not regret his choice to stay in the world where his beloved girl lives. And there is everything that is dear to his heart. Everyone noticed that he did not hesitate at all in his moment. But at the same time, my mother came up and kissed our character, saying that everything was very difficult. As soon as the kiss was done, the dimensional portal appeared. We realized that Lilstein was a traitor. He said that our protagonist had become too strong, so the Emperor's heart would help him deal with it. They all started saying that they didn't need Shihan now, because he had already saved their world, for which they were grateful. But they just didn't want a new emperor. They couldn't afford to give power to such a person. Our character wanted to look at his beloved, but she also only smiled slyly and said that she did not want to be the emperor's wife. She herself wanted to become the empress. She even said that she did not want such a groom. Our hero resisted, but she said that she would help him ease all the pain. She just pushed him back into the portal to his native land, while smiling wider and wider at the same time. Once the portal disappeared, everyone assumed that the world was saved by a hero from another world and 6 of his allies. The savior fulfilled his role, that many accepted his desire to return to their homeland and are ready to take care of the future of the empire. They all proclaimed that Shihan would be proud of them, and also that the reign of the emperor was over. Now the empire could definitely rely on them, on the 6 emperors. In the empire, after this statement, taxes were raised, and people were released from hard work. 6 emperors were in harmony, and Maduro ruled the land of Theranor. It was a carefree time, until the next portal made itself felt again. In front of us is a certain village. The girl, as usual, went outside to hang up the laundry to dry. She hums something under her breath because the weather allows her to do this. She really likes that there are only beautiful clouds in the sky. She even thought it would be great to go out and plow the fields in this weather. As soon as she started, she noticed a fish in the side. It seemed very strange to her. Only after she was happy, she realized that there was definitely something strange here because there was no place for fish to come from. So she just decided to continue working. As soon as she turned around, she noticed that something strange was happening, because not only did flounder fly to her, but also fish. Do they fall from the sky? But as soon as she looked at the sky, she noticed that our protagonist, who was completely naked, was flying there. The girl couldn't believe it because what is it? But as soon as Shihan turned his head, he couldn't believe it. And he started laughing so hard that she didn't know what was going on. But Shihan himself was just thrilled. He realized that he finally returned to where he was taken from a little earlier. It was already evening. Our protagonist woke up in some kind of bed. He could not understand where he was. So it was at the same moment that the same girl who brought him a bowl of porridge came up to him. She was very concerned about the state of her guest, because she could not even believe that a person will fall from the sky. Our hero tried to lift his body, but at the same moment he felt that his body was incredibly sore. His body just ached with pain. Of course, the girl realized that this was a foreigner, because he spoke in the unofficial language of Theranor. Is he from any tribe? But as soon as she thought about it, our character immediately began to address her in her own language, which surprised her very much, and also proved that he was not from any tribe. The girl immediately said that they were about 12 hours away from Garan village, and then even said that they were in the Lilstein Empire, that they were on the territorial unit formed by Emperor Lilstein I after the Revolution of 7 Heroes. Our main character's face just changed beyond recognition. He just couldn't believe that Lilstein had become an emperor. He was probably a real bastard to be able to achieve this. But at the same time, while Shihan was coming up with his incredible revenge plan, he realized that he was completely naked, so he asked for at least a piece of cloth for him. After a while, he started chewing something again. It was porridge that had an unusual fishy smell. And then he thanked the hostess for her hospitality. Of course, the girl could not get enough of her guest, because he had an incredible physique, as well as sharp facial features. Was it really a man from the nobility in front of her? But as soon as Shihan finished another plate, he decided to ask the name of his savior. After which the girl called herself Alita, to which our hero said that he did not know that ordinary peasant women are now trained in swordsmanship. As soon as he said this, the girl was shocked, because how did he even understand this? After all, she is actually a swordsman, but is not part of any knight squad. She said that Atki saw her work as a kind of mercenary while fulfilling individual orders, but personally she is engaged in crop production. Once he had asked all the questions he wanted, he decided to ask one thing, after which nothing normal could be expected. He asked who the girl was to Emperor Lustanad. As soon as this question was asked, the girl was just incredibly shocked even more. She knocked over the table that was in front of her and then completely took out a dagger. But just as she was preparing for her next attack, our protagonist was already standing behind her, saying that he didn't want to fight. The girl tried to throw blow after blow, but she couldn't hit it, because was there a swordsman standing in front of her too? But while she was throwing punches, Shihan was trying to get through to her that he didn't want to fight. She thought this was the right time to strike, but she hadn't considered the fact that the spoon could be used as a weapon to deflect an iron dagger. She fell to the floor and asked who was standing in front of her, to which our main character replied that he is Seong Shihan, he has arrived in the land. Of course, the girl was just in shock, because really in front of her is their savior from Earth. This surprised our hero, because really someone else remembers about him, and he understood that she attacked him for a reason, because even he would be offended by such a question about such a tyrant. But at the same time, the girl replied that in fact her full name is Alithers Bella Lustanad Lusklan. She is the daughter of the last emperor. We understand that the story of Alita was very difficult and complicated, because when the castle was stormed, her mother asked the bodyguard to take care of her daughter, that is, Alita, who taught her how to fight, as well as how to handle a sword. However, when Alita's identity was revealed, it was he who suffered a very sad fate. He fell, and Alita had to leave her own empire. So since then she has been living in such a small village, but still gets out to earn a little extra money. Of course, right now, Shihan felt a slight aftertaste of misunderstanding, because was this really the daughter of his enemy sitting in front of him? But of course, the girl said that it didn't really matter at the moment, because the emperor is already long dead, even though people are afraid that someone will take his place. Members of the imperial family are able to open a mortal from the dimensions, so they are being hunted. So Alita, I thought it was another killer. But at that moment, our protagonist was lost in thought, saying that he was also set up. So the more he learns about what happened, the more angry he will get. But at the same time, he calmed down. Because you should not just be discouraged. Sometimes good people like him actually fall from the sky. The girl did not understand what he was talking about, but decided to keep silent, and then decided to ask what was eating her, because is it really Savior from another world in front of her? She had even heard that he had simply returned to Earth after killing her father. So how had he managed to get back to Theranor, and why without his clothes on? But this all really upset our character, so he broke a mug, and then they said that such things are simply beyond his control, because the fact is that only a living organism can pass through the portal, and not things. So even when Theranor first got to Theranor, he was naked, right, and even returning to Earth 10 years ago in the middle of Kwangwamun Square. Alita didn't know what he was talking about, but she said that she didn't understand the reason for his new arrival, because did someone call him again? But at the same time, Shihan said that if you think about it like that, then it was him who summoned himself. He just went back with his powers. Alita was shocked, but our main character went on to say that it took him 10 years to do this, and he didn't do it all by himself. As soon as he started to speak, he stopped talking at one point. He told Alita that she was being persecuted. Was it because she could summon a creature from another world? Alita confirmed this information, after which Shihan pretended to be very screwed up. He said that to get to Theranor, you need to find a magical support for safe movement. And he used the power of the Emperor's relatives, who are able to open a spatial portal, and that's exactly what such blood flows in. The girl understood why he asked her at the very beginning about her belonging to the past Emperor. And then our character said that it turns out that he chose her as a summoner, which means that everyone will see that she summoned our hero using magic. Alita couldn't believe it, so at the same time, she looked at the street where the knights had come. At the head of a certain group was an old man who told the captain that they had detected magic signals from the hut in front of them, and everyone was ready, as was the knight Zeno. As soon as I told him that I was ready, the knight asked me to stay close to him during the encirclement. Of course, as soon as the squad surrounded the house and our heroes were preparing for battle in the house, Shihan noticed that Alita, she was already ready for such moments. Everything was read in her movements. But in our character's thoughts, it was as if he just took and ruined her life by simply breaking into her house. So he decided to go to Alita and ask her to say out loud what she thought, but Alita only said that she was grateful to our protagonist for warning about the siege in advance. By this time, the entire squad was already ready to attack. The house was covered in flames thanks to that old man. Many people thought that this was already too much, but despite everything, Alita just broke out after a moment. She started to deal with each opponent, but only then noticed that there were too many opponents. She just wouldn't be able to fend off all of them. After a moment, she dodged the punch that was delivered by Knight Zeno, who was covered in an incredibly intimidating aura. Alita, in turn, realized that it wasn't just an aura. It was the aura of magic armor. Her opponent was a level stronger than her, but still tried to make at least one successful attack. The knight took the hit in turn, but it didn't cause any damage, because his equipment was a level higher than Alita's. After these words, the blow went straight to the girl. She just took it and leaned back. After this blow, the girl realized that her arm was broken. She thought that she could take something, while the knight says that she should only give up. As soon as he said that, the girl said that she gave up. The knight thought that this was all great, but someone spoke behind him. It was our hero who got too close, and a knight of this level didn't even notice his presence. Who was standing in front of him anyway? Zeno asked him to identify himself, but at the same time, Shihan only said that he was tired of him, and the knight was sent flying with just one blow. The entire squad was shocked after all. What was going on? Like their captain was just taken and trampled into the ground. But Alita did not understand why our character was fighting against the warriors at all, because his former comrades were standing in front of him. As soon as this action was done, the same old man asked to get rid of Shihan. Many immediately began their offensive, so our protagonist had no choice but to also deal with all the knights in one blow. As soon as Zeno regained consciousness, he noticed that his entire squad was lying in front of him unconscious. He could not just believe that an unarmed man had single-handedly killed an entire army. However, everything reminded the knight of the movements of a certain hero that was in their kingdom. As soon as the knight woke up, our hero already noticed him, and then he was about to make him sleep. Zeno told our character to wait, but Shihan was adamant. He slammed his enemy back into the ground. Once he was done with that, he looked at the old man who was also shocked by the power he saw in front of him. After all, neither the knight squad nor the mages could do anything against a person like our hero. Where did such a devilish swordsman come from in the first place? As soon as Shihan finished, he told Alita that she was no longer a threat from those knights, but would she continue to sit on the ground? Alita realized that they really should leave, so after a moment, she decided to get up as well. Of course, the old man did not want to let them go, but he knew that the mission failed. He asked to collect all the bodies of the dead, but one of the knights with a trembling face said that all the knights were just stuck in the ground. Not a single bone was broken. But what happened? By this point, our characters had already reached the forest where they could not be found, even though our character was constantly looking around. Of course, Shihan understood that his small strength at that time was further reduced due to the side effects of spatial displacement. His battle magic level was 10, and his mana overall was negligible compared to his past self. I wonder how long it will take our protagonist to regain his former form. But as soon as he looked to the side, he noticed that Alita was very tormented, because her arm was broken, but still happy that everything could have been worse, which made our hero surprised. As soon as she and Shihan tied her arm, Alita decided to say goodbye. But Shihan stopped her, because shouldn't they go together now, or was she going to get out of the forest with a broken arm? Of course the girl was thinking that she will cope with everything herself, but our hero decided to help her, because in the past he was partly to blame, and he cannot allow a wounded person to leave the territory in this state. Alita spent a long time trying to think about what our character had said to her, but after a few minutes she replied that she would be very grateful while addressing Shihan rather formally. He, in turn, asked not to apply so formally anymore, and then asked what she was going to do now, because she was declassified, so she could not stay in her previous place. Of course, she also understood this, so they decided to go to the trading city of Kaon. At the same time, at the Lilstein Empire Palace Lilsteinu, His Majesty was approached by his servant, saying that there was news from the Defilin Mountain Party, and this was the first ruler of the Lilstein Empire, Lilstein I. He closed his book, and after hearing the information, he went to the underground passage that led directly to the Red Door, which could only be opened by magic. As soon as he entered, someone would say that they hated him, because he even dared to call himself a hero. Lilstein just smiled and said that the half-month had been good for the Lusklin geek, but the color of the magic circle under his feet had changed color, because the process of the magical transformation process had come to an end. The guy shouted at Lilstein, but Lilstein just smiled, saying that someone would soon lose their heart, after which the guy was immediately killed. Lilstein used fire magic for this particular kill, realizing that gathering power from distant relatives was almost pointless. It was only enough to break down spatial barriers. Lilstein realized that he needed even closer relatives of the Emperor for experiments, because he remembered that his squad was defeated by an unknown person who had dark hair, black eyes, and looked like a member of the Galan race. Is it really Shihan who has returned? But of course he tried to push those thoughts away, because how he could cross the dimensional gate would be impossible. But by this point, our heroes had already arrived in a shopping town, where our protagonist could not believe in the reality of the present, because when this town was part of the same empire, it was called Southern Colonium. So Shihan did not even immediately understand that it was him. He even missed this place, because he had lived there once in the past. Alita couldn't believe it, so our character replied that because it was a shopping mall, it was easy to hide, and there was a Galan race that looked like Northern Asians. At first, Alita couldn't understand what he was talking about, and then she was completely shocked because really he was talking about imitators, or the power of 1,000 forms of the Empress. The power of 1,000 forms was an ability that allowed one to use battle energy to change one's appearance. Even the smallest change could make one look like someone else. This unique skill belongs to the Empress Lavina, just like stealth. However, it was our hero who taught this skill to her, but even offered to teach it to Alita, who for some reason immediately refused to help. Of course, she wanted to learn this skill, but she didn't show it. While our hero was choosing the place where they will live, then at one point he noticed a building that was not there before. Earlier on the site of which there was a gallows, he realized that Theranor changed a lot, so I suggested we go inside. Of course, Alita was scared because what if there were ghosts in this building? To which our protagonist replied that even so, he would be able to see his companions. As soon as they went inside, they met a very dissatisfied cashier who was very angry at something that our character just couldn't understand. But Alita explained to him that he was just addressing him as you. But even if our Shihan is a legendary hero, we should not forget about the rules of decency. Of course, he realized that he hadn't used this language in a long time, and he didn't treat Alita very respectfully, which really upset him. Of course, while he was sad, the girl told him that there were more important things to do, such as their next actions. Immediately, Shihan said that he was going to spend a little more time with the girl, but she said that she was against it. It was rude, but at the same time she explained her answer, saying that she was not the only person in this city. And besides, she was wanted, and if he continued to travel with her, then Alita would have to wonder every time why she agreed in the first place. This was all true, so our character said that he simply had no other choice, because without it, she would immediately be caught. He said that if you use magic to summon someone from another world, the energy of the transition will be felt, but no one called him, because he came himself. so most likely no one in this world knows about his appearance. But still the magic of summoning left a trace, so every time, when it moves, it causes even more vibration. They would still need to be careful. Alita was shocked, because what was the point of their escape that didn't make any sense? But at the same time, our hero said that there was no need to worry so much, because he arrived only yesterday, but already blocked the vibrations with magic. So while the magic works, they will not find them. But they need to update this enchantment every 2 or 3 days. Of course, Alita understood that she needed our main character, but why would Shihan need her? By this time, we were back in the Lustenad Empire, the capital of Delstri, where the same knight was asking for his honor to be returned, as well as to punish those who had been taken by the wicked at a high price. Of course, the old man in front of him said that everything didn't make sense, because even the emperor didn't punish those responsible for the failure of the mission, and the knight was going to return to the battlefield with an inexperienced army. Zeno kept shouting that a knight who obeyed an order couldn't be forgiven. He believed that a real knight should clear his tainted name. Of course, the old man was pleased, because the man in front of him had not forgotten who a real knight was, so he ordered Zeno to return his honor. After the knight walked out the door, all he knew was that the 2 swordsmen would need money, and they were both boys. Most likely, I'll just be trying to survive by trying to work and run errands. It all came down to the fact that they had to go to the trading city of Kargon, and there was only one way to find a job there. He knew that he could try to figure out their location, but to be honest, Zeno didn't care about the emperor's relatives at all. He only wanted to check out that unknown guy, because no matter how you look at it, he was too similar to him. What if it was a legendary hero at all? He decided that he needed to see for himself. After a moment, we can see a certain butler who meets Mr. Ted, and also introduces the 2 hired swordsmen that Karugan told them about. It was about our heroes. Of course, while they were being introduced, Alita couldn't believe that our protagonist chose a normal name, but Sean just believed that no one would get anything. Of course, we understand that warriors who were able to use battle energy were divided into 6 ranks. The rank of Grain, which could only increase physical abilities, Warrior, which could saturate iron with energy, Knights, which can energize combat armor, while those who can saturate air with energy to create a wedge have the rank of Deity. However, in the history of Theranor, there were only a few people who were capable of such a thing. Shihan reached this rank once, but because of the spatial movement, he lost all his combat and magic energy, which was very frustrating, but not the same Ted because the rank of Warrior was somehow amazing for a guy like our character. So Ted was positive the next day when they met. And they will go. As soon as the conversation was over, Shihan thought that it was very hard to earn money. It was not easy to be a hired fighter, because if everything was like before, then he would just rob the nearest estate. Alita couldn't believe it because did the heroes steal too? But as soon as our protagonist said that the girl he loved was a thief, and their act was not bad, because all the nobility of that time was pure evil. Alita was shocked, and then even more so when she heard that in fact our protagonist would have been ready to kill someone, or rob them. As soon as he was done, he asked about the monsters they would have to kill. So Alita replied that it seemed that Barceliana pack of Igneas had settled down near Barcelona. The wolves. The squad had already been assembled, but they had failed due to the lack of fighters, so it was decided to take independent swordsmen into the service. Of course, spitting wolves evoked memories of our hero because 13 years ago, when he had to face monsters for the first time, it was also wolves, so he had to drive them into the forest with his friends. As soon as Shihan thought about his friends, he remembered the words that were said to him. His ears and heart were very hurt by these words, so he decided that these errands would be just right for warming up. He would just gather combat experience. Alita was a Shoykroan after all. If there was a man sitting in front of her who stopped her sword with a spoon, but spoke of losing power. But if Shihan heard that, he probably said that he actually lost too much, because it took him something to stop the sword at all. It was driving Alita crazy, but our character just threw up his hands and said that despite the lack of energy, he still had experience, because even if the international champion is lower in level, it does not mean that he will lose in battle. As soon as morning came, Ted asked everyone to get up and go to battle. Of course, this whole picture raised questions for our protagonist, because did they really not change from his last visit and continue to use iron armor on a permanent basis? While they were walking forward, our hero continued to ask the girl about her condition, but at the same moment Alita felt a strange smell, after which the wolves began to climb on them. Ted was ready to take on these wolves, but they just knocked him out in one hit, and he definitely needed to take off that heavy armor to start dodging. Many knights continued to fight, but still this picture made it clear to our hero that the swordsmen are much weaker than he thought, because even he could deal with the entire pack alone. But this would attract too much attention. He heard that there was too much noise behind him. Did they really need help? But as soon as he turned around, he noticed the pack leader, so he decided to have some fun. Right at this moment, Shihan was facing danger, or rather the pack leader, while the rest of his squad fled in fear. Of course, Ted said that we should not give up, so he left all the work to our heroes, who were ready to fight, even despite Alita's surprise. Of course, our protagonist didn't want to run away, which is why he suggested this fight. The wolves continued to attack while Alita and our protagonist hacked at them at every opportunity. Of course, Shihan noticed that Alita was strong, but he didn't notice that her sword got stuck in the pack leader's skull, and then the pack leader knocked her down completely. We're back to talking about why Sean needs a girlfriend, but he only said that he wanted to be honest. So he said that in the past he was summoned by sacrificing the hearts of nobles, which allowed him to stay in Theranor despite the Emperor's wishes. But this time he arrived in a way similar to a summoning ritual rather than a sacrifice. The summoner's connection is a guarantee of his existence in this world, so he will return to Earth again if Alita dies. By this time, he was still running towards the girl, but he couldn't make it in time because his skills were lacking. In all the 10 years that he had been away from Theranor, he had dreamed of coming back here. He had even been ready to fall out of the sky naked again. But the main thing was to be in Theranor. How can he even come back because of something like this? At the same time, he filled his sword with mana and tried to walk on the wolf for the next time, after which they were alive. Of course, as soon as it was over, our protagonist decided to ask how Chuvdvwed Alita feels, if she was bitten by animals. However, Alita said that everything was fine, even though she didn't expect the fire wolves to have a tradition of giving live humans to the leader. Of course, even with all of this, the protagonist was also very surprised when he first saw a firewolf that was striking with lightning. Or was it a mutation? But to this, the girl said that before she certainly did not need this foreign identity, but up now they are allies, so she asked why Sean hides his real identity. After all, the 6 kingdoms are countries built by his comrades, so wherever he goes, he will be welcome. But at the same time, our hero confessed that if he was lucky, he would not be executed. But in fact, as soon as he killed the Emperor, a knife was stuck in his back and forcibly sent to Earth using return magic. All of them are a few minutes old, but he remembers them incredibly clearly. Sean had never been able to understand what they'd done, why they'd betrayed him in the first place. What was he even thinking if he couldn't see their true intentions after all these years of fighting? Alita didn't say anything, so our character thought she was shocked because she was now embroiled in a conflict against all countries. But Alita just reacted calmly and assumed that he was back for revenge. So that's why he's hiding his identity. Our character was suitably surprised that Alita understood him, but didn't even react because he'd just declared war on all the kingdoms. However, Alita only said that they were all enemies, and she had fought against Theranor for the past 10 years, and she was given no choice. Of course, Sean knew that his companion was incredibly positive. They laughed a little, but by this time our hero noticed that someone was heading in their direction. They stood in a ready stance. They thought it was an enemy, or a person from Ted's squad, so they decided not to let their guard down. But at the same moment, a Lilstein spy came out of the bushes. Alita immediately decided to attack, even though the knight said he didn't want to fight. Our protagonist decided to use his strike to put the knight to sleep. But Zeno was waiting for this. He was right that this was a person he knew about. And then he cancelled the skill that was activated by our hero altogether. Sean was surprised by this, because he had used this skill as a child. Few even among his old comrades knew about it. Who exactly was this knight in front of him? Zeno at the same time was definitely sure that this was the right person, and then reached into his bag. Our hero was wary, but at the same moment the knight took out his underpants from his bag, asking if they belonged to our protagonist. Sean, along with Alita, were very surprised, but then he ordered the man in front of him to be killed altogether. Of course, Alita was still forced to kill the with underpants, who still begged for mercy. But then our hero asked to wait because he saw the handwriting on the underpants in Korean, or rather his name. Of course, the knight was happy about this. He even asked if our character remembers him, because he is a child who was saved by Sean 12 years ago, Zeno from the village of Baron. Of course, this all reminded our main protagonist of that village, while the knight was telling what he did. Zeno said that when he started using battle energy himself, and became a swordsman, He learned the art of leveling attack power shown back then, a thoughtful skill to avoid unnecessary casualties. Now Sean remembered that at that moment he only wanted to test his new skill. But if the same boy is standing in front of him, then he looks quite grown up. To which Zeno replied with some sweet phrase that was said by our hero earlier. Of course, our character thought it was strange that Zenon was carrying his underpants around with him. But Zenon said that there was nothing strange about it, because he still has a lot of things at home, such as books, action figures, novels, drawings. He generally collects everything related to the hero from another world. He even said that those underpants were incredibly rare, that he was the one who dropped them during the battle with the Mad Emperor of Lustenad, and Zeno spent half a year's salary on them. Of course, this all made our main character worry, but at the same time, the knight took a pose on his knees and held out his sword, saying that he swore to serve the Lilstein family, because the king was a comrade of our main protagonist, and then asked to serve our hero at all. As soon as our hero asked what would happen if he became an enemy of Lilstein, Zeno said that he would also fight against them. There was no doubt in Zeno's eyes, so Sean decided to accept Zeno Stride's sword, which made him very happy. Zeno said that he would deal with the rest of the wolves, but our character said that they had already been dealt with. Zeno did not understand anything, because does our protagonist not know that wolves always go in pairs? That basically the corpse of a male wolf attracts a female? As soon as all this was said, the female herself showed up. She was just an incredible size. Of course, Sean realized that he was very much mistaken when he did not take into account such an important detail, so even Alita began to laugh. While he and Alita were arguing, Zeno asked them to introduce everything to him, because this was what he had always wanted to do, and more precisely, to serve the hero that he looked up to. But what impression did he leave on Sean? Of course, to confirm his intentions, he decided to show everything he could against the wolf. Alita noticed that Zeno's skills were at an incredible level, which is exactly what our main character noticed. Alita said it was very strange to talk about talent when you're a genius yourself, and she was generally annoyed by geniuses like our character. However, to all her words, Sean said that he was not a genius, rather an exception, because he was an Earthman, but Lavina was a real genius. Alita said nothing, but the battle against the wolf continued. Most likely it was coming to an end, but at the same moment Zeno was struck by lightning and fell to the ground. Zeno just couldn't figure out where the fire wolf's electric magic came from. Of course, Alita wanted to intervene, but Sean asked her to leave everything to him, because he was from another world. Alita understood why he asked for such a favor, since all creatures from other worlds are immune to magic, so no magic like fire will work on him. He went further and further, until the wolf used the magic of Jektrix Setswa on our protagonist, which for some reason worked and gave an effect. No one could believe it, so our hero had to use his power. He just went and dealt with the wolf in one blow, until he realized why the lightning worked on him. As soon as he was done with everything, he was approached by his companions, who were very excited about the situation no less than the character. But as soon as they looked back, they noticed that for some reason, the wolf's body started to disappear. As soon as they returned to the manor, Ted welcomed them with open arms and gave them a reward of 600 silver coins. Of course, they understood that they would need more money in the future, but it was also nice to get this amount. Sean was even glad that he would be able to perform more complex tasks, until Alita told him that such tasks are very rare. However, as soon as they started talking about money, Zeno appeared and brought 100 gold coins. No one could understand, because where did he get them at all? But Zeno just burst into tears and said that he had to sell Sean's underwear. Alita was also interested in the idea, but Zeno interrupted them and asked about their future plans. Of course, our hero said that they have 3 plans, but he has not decided anything yet. There was certainly one place that would be easy to conquer, so I decided it was time to head north to the kingdom of Jacksongard. At the same time, in the Lilstein Kingdom's laboratory, Lilstein himself was confronted by Trandon, who said that the Norma 11 and 12 test samples had been destroyed, as well as that they had lost test subject number 1. Lilstein just went berserk. He just couldn't believe it. Of course, we understand that Theranor there have been 4 magical towers in Theranor for thousands of years. The red, white, blue, and black ivory towers. The first Emperor Kurodli's Vertulusklan was the most powerful mage in history. He gathered all the knowledge and wisdom from the mages of all of Theranor, and placed in 4 towers, because they were divided into classes. So it was at the bottom that magic training took place. It was the floor that denotes the skill of the magician. Of course, Lilstein wasn't happy, since Thrandon was an 8th floor mage, but he couldn't handle his assignment, so he threatened to fire him. Trandon didn't like it, of course, but at least they didn't fire him and gave him another chance. By that time, in the capital Rattensel, the kingdom of Jacksongard, a man who was surrounded by women, or rather the first King Jacksongard, was visited by a certain butler. Of course, Tom didn't like that the king was throwing a party again, but he couldn't say anything to Tom. But he still asked him not to forget to solve political issues. Otherwise, his authority might be shaken. Of course, the king thought that he wasn't such a bad ruler, that he didn't do anything so bad, which was just the opposite. As soon as he finished talking about his merits, he turned to his servant and said that he should understand that he had done nothing wrong for the kingdom so far. Could he even be compared to the last king? The old man started to say something, but the king made it clear that he shouldn't be bothered, so the servant named Squire left the room. He understood that their king had combat skills, but no management skills. As soon as he left, the Duke himself came to the king, who made it clear that he respected the king very much. The king also loved the Duke very much, and his attitude towards himself. The Duke tried to hand over some pieces of paper that would need to be signed, but the king again made it clear that he would not do this. By this time, on the outskirts of the city, our heroes came to some strange house, which, as it turned out, was recently bought by them. Of course, they didn't like this kind of place, but still, in order to avoid being discovered by other mercenaries, they should buy a house. Zirin even wished that he had sold his own house for such a purpose. As soon as they got inside, they realized that they were going to have to clean up a bit. But it was too late. Zeno threw everyone out of the house and started an incredible cleaning, which threw all our heroes into shock. A few seconds later, the house was already cleaned. Everyone was shocked at the speed, as well as the cleanliness, and Sean was happy with their result at that time. So now that our heroes have a base, we can start preparing for the battle against Jacksongard. As soon as they sat down on the chairs, Zeno began to say that at that time Theranor was ruled by 6 kingdoms, of which 2 were strong, 2 were weak, and 2 were medium. Out of the forces of the former, there are Okerletvsvo, Lilstein, and Inachius. Out of the middle ones, the kingdom of Saffron and Fellows. But Jacksongard and Theorante are the 2 weakest. They have not even shown any effectiveness in their decisions over the past 10 years. So there have been a lot of conflicts, such as the Kargon War, where the kingdom of Lilstay and the empire of Inachius. We haven't decided who will take control of Kargon. Despite the fact that many people call their kingdoms strong, in reality they do not really outweigh each other. Of course, the 2 kingdoms came to a decision. They decided to divide the world into the governance of Kargon. Of course, this information was very pleasant to our hero's ears, because he could not even believe that people like them did something like this. Zeno was also very angry, because such scoundrels as the kings of kingdoms killed a real hero to get more power. But the knight knelt before him. Sean made it clear that he was still alive and then looked at Alita, who was still training with a skill that would help her change her appearance. Of course, this was very funny for our character, which Alita herself did not understand. After our character has had a good laugh, he asks Alita to calm down and put her thoughts in order, and then just tries to imagine that she is using magic to cover her face with her hand. Alita listened to everything and then expressed everything that she thinks, or rather what our hero explains to her the same thing for the 3rd time, so she asked me to explain it differently. However, he only scratched his head and said that his method would not suit them, because he was an Earthman. Of course, you can say that Earthmen and Terran people have the same body structure, but they have significant differences in the way they fight and in magical energy. New energy is not born. For its development, you need to be highly spiritual developed, as if you are looking for something in a huge warehouse in complete darkness. But for Earthlings, for example, Shihan's warehouse was completely illuminated. In it, the combat energy was born by itself, along with magic, as a result of which he was able to achieve mastery in just 3 years. Of course, everyone knew it wasn't fair, but at this point, based on Lilstein's research, it all depended on consciousness. Of course, Alita realized once again that all this was unfair. But there was nothing to be done, because our hero forced her to try to study everything herself again. Alita interrupted the words of our character, and then asked what would happen if they tried to send the person back from the portals, and then return him. Would he really get the same powers? Sean didn't know the exact result, but he thought it would be like this. After a few seconds, they started to feel a strange earthquake. They didn't know what it was, but then only our hero realized that it was a monster that attacked a neighboring settlement. Immediately, our heroes went there, but they could not understand, because how did the monsters get to the city center in general? There was definitely something wrong with the city that was covered in forest. A moment later, squads of knights appeared and asked our characters to stop fighting and fight. As soon as our protagonist decided to ask what was going on, Sean felt a strange magic that he felt before. It was the king who asked his people not to worry. Of course, the king at the same moment began to shout that at this moment his squad would take care of everyone, and he himself armed himself with 2 axes at the ready, saying that his bones had long been stiffened. Of course, the audience noticed all this fervor in his eyes. Everyone was delighted that their king was fighting like this. However, as soon as the king showed everything that he is capable of, the monsters for some reason came to their senses and wanted to run away. But the king did not leave a chance. Zeno also noticed that the king was using a battle seal that he was seeing for the first time. Alita was shocked, because what does that even mean? But at the same time, the knight explained that this item can only be used by a swordsman with the rank of master, and this is one of the magic seals that use combat magic. The king, of course, continued at the same time, feeding the interest of the audience, which exploded because in front of them was again the king who won. All our heroes thought because they were facing a real monster. But our Sean realized that Jacksonguard is a real scoundrel, because in order to gain the trust of citizens, he is engaged in dirty deeds. Or rather, what allows monsters to invade the territory of their city. It was all a show, because of which the squad of our protagonist did not I did it all by myself. Of course, this whole performance was a bluff, but our hero was sure that the king of Jacksonguard simply could not arrange everything like this, because in addition to dementia and cruelty, he had unshakable ideals. Because did he really fall so low for the sake of recognition of the people? As soon as our main character got a better look at the king's face, he noticed that he had an incredible face. He really liked that he was being praised. Isn't this all a joke? Most likely this is the work of his subordinates. They will just pull off such machinations while they arrange performances for the amusement of the king. This is much worse than just bribing because the king was never very smart. While our hero thought so, the king looked at him, who eclipsed Sean for the first time in his city. But of course he would not do anything, because it was already worth returning to the castle, where a variety of beauties and the like were waiting for him. Our character continued to think that the king of this kingdom was a complete fool, but Jax's condition simply didn't change. So all this made it clear that it was impossible to enter into an open game. You had to be careful about all the details and carefully prepare everything. It had already been 10 days since Shihan and his party had stopped in the capital city of Latincell. Alita learned the basics of the power of 1,000 shapes and can now change her shape, and Zeno learned more about the art of destroying mountains. Shihan himself focused on improving the state of his mana and magic energy, and increasing his resource by 3 times. While they were working on honing their abilities and quietly waiting for the right opportunity, the wise king found some culprits, or just pagans. The kingdom was simply crying out for the help of the Gyrioi. Of course, this announcement was noticed by our heroes who passed by, and Zeno said that these pagans are from the cult of the true god from another world, heroes. However, in fact, now this clan is called the Second Coming of Shihan, which is very upset, and then completely surprised. He started to say that he just couldn't believe it, but then Zeno went on to say that according to legend, Shihan is actually the son of the god heroes from another world, and he was summoned to punish the people who were destroying the empire. Of course, everything annoyed our main character, because there was a piece of truth in this whole story. But he said that this was their chance, because subjugating pagans who sow panic among innocent people is an incredible task for the king. And Jackson, of course, wants to build a team against them. But our protagonist will also participate in it. It was at that moment that they decided what they would do next. However, as soon as they came to the squad, they noticed that there was some kind of count in front of him, which made it clear that they were setting up without Jackson, but still participation would be useful. In turn, the count himself was very happy, although you can't tell from him. But he was able to convince the king not to go on this task. But how did he get into all this turmoil in the first place? At the same time, we see that the count himself was persuaded by the same magician from the ivory tower that his request would be rather strange. But still, the count would fulfill it. The count knew it was exhausting, but all he had to do was subdue a small group of pagans, so he asked them to move out. Of course, in the end, the pagans themselves appeared before us, who firmly believed in God every time they said his name and continued to participate in rituals. They even sacrificed each other, saying that the Dragon of Heroes himself would be honored to kill the righteous. As soon as they came forward, the dragon itself appeared, which came out of the cave. It immediately sat down those who came forward and went back. Of course, the chief himself understood that as long as he had Lan's special weasel pollen, he could do whatever he wanted, since the dragon continued to fulfill his requests. But how long would he be able to control the dragon at all? After all, the time will come and he will start to deny everything. So the head decided to have fun for the last time. Of course, in a moment, we are back to the same group that the Count has assembled. They have already arrived at the place where their camp will be located in order to spend the night. Zeno realized that it was all chaos, no order in contrast to the official army. How would they even fight if they didn't know anything? But to this, Alita only said that of course this is expected because this is just an expedition. However, of course, something went wrong, and Zeno got mad at Alita again after that. Our protagonist had to deal with their anger on his own. While they were talking, Shihan realized that he was very hungry, so he should have prepared something. Zeno, hearing all this, just lit up, so immediately went to prepare something. When he came to the cauldron, the girl offered stew, because when traveling, this is the most delicious and quick dish. Our protagonist thought that of course it was, but they didn't have the ingredients to make it taste good. Zeno, in turn, only remained silent, and in a second the stew was ready. It was just incredibly delicious. No one could believe that you can cook like this, even though for a night, cooking is just a hobby. As soon as Alita ate the first bowl, she didn't even deny herself another one. All this made our main character smile until it started raining. Of course, everyone was nervous because not only did they have to organize everything properly, but they also had to discuss the plan to destroy the demon cult. Alita said that their chief commander said that the cult of the second coming of Shihan receives from demons, so they definitely shouldn't worry about an attack, because that cult is demons, which means they keep animals and animals. But at the same time, our hero said that just because of this, everything is the opposite. Because even if you are an incredible master, it will be impossible to suppress the animal instinct. He was sure that nothing would happen. But again, as is usually the case, it was announced that the enemy was attacking. It was demons, which made our main protagonist think that Theranor has changed in 10 years. No one in the tents could believe that the demons were out in the rain either. They thought that they were being controlled by someone, but still one of the captains asked not to stand still. It was necessary to start acting before they all fell and were eaten. They thought that the mercenaries would definitely be able to handle it, but unfortunately, the small blades of the mercenaries simply couldn't handle it. The mercenaries were very scared, so our main character only had to take matters into his own hands and start taking command. He told everyone to focus on individual monsters. This is how the demon forces will fall into decline. Two captains at the same time noticed that Sean is incredibly useful. He commanded even during chaos, so if he is so smart, then they will definitely need it. Of course, after a while, the mercenaries had already defeated the last of the demons, and they were glad that they had succeeded. But our character only thought after the fight that all 44 animals appeared, and none of them tried to escape. How is it that such a strong magical mind control could exist? Our hero has never even encountered such a level of spell, even when he fought against the Empire many years ago. Sure enough, when he looked at the tents and noticed the mages who were discussing something very intensely, Sean knew that something was definitely going on, which made him smile. After a few hours, Grav was commanding no one to sleep. He was just commanding everyone and threatening punishments, which really annoyed every mercenary. Zeno and Alita also said that this wasn't some captain in front of them. He was just a complete egomaniac. Of course, our main character said that he behaves like this all the time, which surprised Zeno very much because does Sean really know him? But our protagonist only said that a little, because that person was called a man with the body of a sage and the mind of a beast. The knight thought for a while and at first wanted to think that he was not so useless, but then something in the words of our hero made him wonder if he had confused something. Of course, Sean just smiled and said that he had heard everything correctly, because in front of them was just a weakling. He had no fighting skills, but he was resilient, just like a cockroach. You couldn't even think that it was the Count himself. Alita also thought about it, because in fact, such a useless person would definitely not be able to get such a position. It was already evening, the action in the Zard villages. The Count himself said that everyone had performed well in yesterday's battle, so the official conquest of the cult would start tomorrow, so he asked everyone to rest as much as they could. Finally, people began to relax a little. They even paid for hotels, which surprised them very much. However, the only one who was not happy was our character, because no one could believe that all the people who were still complaining yesterday had just been persuaded to rent one hotel for the evening. Zeno laid out their beds on the floor so that our Sean just collapsed on the pillow. He wanted to rest, but at the same moment a certain girl came into the room and asked the mercenary Sean Stein to approach her. He held up his hand so that the girl noticed him and introduced herself as Dina Crumble, apprentice of the mercenary foreman of the Black Lion Knight Order, and said that the mage Haybark and Jaldaran were waiting for him. All our heroes looked at each other, but they had no choice but to just go ahead. The girl led them to a back room and told them that the Black Lion Knights and mages were resting in it, so since they were holding a confidential meeting, Dina would just leave. Of course, while Dina was leaving, she continued to nag Alita with her eyes, because Alita's rank was amazing for her age. Of course, at this point, our main character has already entered the building with the used skill to change his appearance. He was met by two people who showed him a map, as well as the exact location of the cultists. They also said that the cultists have the power to control monsters, and Sean should have noticed this. The mage was surprised by this because even the mercenaries noticed it, and since this was the case, it was only necessary to keep it a secret. Our character immediately made an incredibly strange face. He said that look at completing this task depending on the amount of benefit that he gets. The mage said that he liked this mood, so he immediately placed a few gold coins on the table. Of course, Zeno thought that this was a lot, but our hero could not believe that the knight thinks so, because recently he himself sold Sean's underpants for as much as 130 gold coins. Sean said that would be enough, so Mago explained that it would just be wise to keep this position going. So he said that they would just need to continue. He said that before, the Second Advent sect didn't have beast-subduing magic. They used dark magic based on sacrifices. Of course, magic is described as ordered and available for study, and the end result can be calculated, while black magic is completely disordered and unpredictable, because it requires sacrifice. Sean was shocked, because now cultists and cultists use monsters with dark magic. But the magician only said that this is not so, because those did not have such sorcery, because this is all a shameful story. In fact, it is a completely new development from the Blue Tower. They said that there used to be a man named Rakrin Proud, who was a well-respected magician and already lived on the 6th floor of the Blue Tower at 37. Thanks to his talent and skills, he got confessions and things like that, but he wanted too much. And because of his mistake, all the experimental beasts just ran away, resulting in him being sentenced to the assignment and losing absolutely everything. Zeno was surprised by all this, to which the magician replied that it was not just a punishment using the 4 elements, but most likely a death sentence. Zeno was incredibly shocked by everything, but the magician asked him to stop worrying so much. The knight realized that he needed to apologize, so the magician explained that what really happened was that the person in question just escaped from prison, taking with him the beasts, or rather the beast that has the ability to control other animals. Of course, this power shocked Sean, because controlling monsters is a terrible thing. So another gray-haired man explained that the main reason for their trip was to kill the monster and eliminate all traces of the Blue Tower's connection with this incident, and Sean's skills would help them in this. Our protagonist scratched his head and made a joke that with their powers they could even kill a dragon, to which the magician said that it was the dragon they should kill, the dragon of the earth. After this shock, our heroes had already woken up in the morning and went straight to the river, discussing all the information that they had heard yesterday. Of course, Sean knew that given his new state of mind after moving to this world, it wouldn't be an easy ordeal. Zeno was also surprised, because why would a swordsman need to subdue the cultists in the first place? Our protagonist wanted to refuse, but then he realized that since they had heard such a secret, they would now be in danger. After the mission, they would even want to get rid of them. All this upset our heroes very much, but then Sean decided that it was time not to think about it, because now it was a peaceful time and everything was fine around. Of course, Alita also tried to support everyone by saying that Zeno had made them confess everything. But instead of silencing them, the mage and archer started silencing them with important information. Of course, all this surprised Sean very much, but Zeno turned to him again and asked if they would help them at all now. But our character, as always, decided to get as much benefit from this situation as possible. So he said that first he needed to find out as much information as possible. A few seconds later, there were a lot of girls around them who were going to wash their clothes. All the girls started asking our heroes about their reasons, asking questions in all sorts of ways, so our heroes had no choice but to talk to them. As soon as our characters went home, they just thought that those old ladies were very nice, but in fact, those old men only wanted to kill our protagonist, because they attacked from behind with a knife. Alita sensed it, and Sean knew that the fanatics' ambush had failed. Of course, Alita said that she was ready, because she is always in this state. Sean thought about it for a while and realized that Alita was a real monster, since she didn't trust even such old ladies. However, by this point, the old ladies were completely out of their minds. She began to say that death is their only salvation, that everyone who will be in their sect will go to heaven. Alita also noticed that there was something wrong with those women, but after 10 seconds they were all lying on the floor unconscious, and Alita realized that the only thing that had changed was their eyes. Sean noticed that they were very strange but crazy. Why did they attack them in the first place? But as soon as they thought about it, they turned around and noticed that everything was ablaze with flames. They couldn't believe that there was a whole squad like these old ladies, and they were wasting their time doing some laundry. They realized that the whole village was a village of heretics. Of course, there was also a commotion in the village. All the heretics, dying, rejoiced, because now they will get to heroes. The swordsman also noticed all this, but there was nothing he could do, as the demonic beasts that were definitely at the head of the heretics were rushing towards him. He tried to resist the monsters, but even after dealing with one, he was approached by a magician who said that demonic beasts are generally scattered throughout the territory. The swordsman was shocked and upset by this, but there was nothing he could do, because he understood that this mission was something very difficult. But the magician also added that the ability to rape demonic animals in that very person became much stronger. Of course, at this moment, they also realized that they should not waste time on empty conversations, because the monsters are approaching the tavern where the Count himself is. He just screamed from the strata, asked to save him. The red-haired girl screamed in fear too, because she knew that she could not cope with the monsters, so our Sean came to her aid, and then Zeno. The swordsman immediately ran up to our hero and said that thanks to our protagonist, the Count was alive. But where are the other mercenaries? Of course, our character didn't have an answer. He just said that heretics had launched such attacks all over the territory. The swordsman asked them to stay put and protect Graf while they focused on saving people from the monsters. A few seconds later, the Count again asked our main character to protect him, as if it was Sean's responsibility from the very beginning. But as soon as this request was voiced, our protagonist noticed that something was approaching from the forest. It was the same earth dragon. By that time, the village was already plunged into chaos. Even Menchik shouted that they were almost done, asked to hold out a little longer. But our main character continued to think ahead. He continued to target new goals and tasks for himself, while the Count said that it was all due to himself. Many heretic mages were also shocked by the appearance of the earth dragon. They all realized that the threat was much greater than all of them had expected. Of course, they tried to reassure themselves that they also had mages, that they needed to think about defending. They used the water barrier to block the blow. But of course, there was one drawback. The whole squad, which believed in its victory, was incredibly tired. The head mage also noticed that their plans were messed up, and the swordsman couldn't believe that one person could control dozens of monsters. Of course, the mage understood that the dragon had a small chance to improve its resistance to effects, but the chance was incredibly small, about 4%. The swordsman realized that there was nothing better than just going into battle on their own, because no matter how tired they were, a real knight would never back down. They would let this evil dragon hear the cry of Black Lion. The dragon started its attack again, so the swordsman had no choice but to defend. Already 3 swordsmen were standing and trying to restrain the dragon. Of course, Zeno also noticed this amazing iron wall-out technique, because the knights did not move a millimeter from the dragon's attack. But Sean saw it as his old comrade Jax, who was just eager to fight. This is the reckless method of fighting that his knights used. At first, our protagonist thought a little and noticed a few more similarities, such as the character, or the style of battle, which all remained unchanged for such a long period of time. He realized that if this was the case, they had a weakness. Sean realized that if they didn't join now, the knights wouldn't be able to defeat the dragon. Of course, the Count didn't like the idea, because who would defend him anyway? But our protagonist just said that if they don't join, they'll get it too, which he really doesn't want. The Count shouted that first we should have taken him to a safe place, which made Sean's entire squad very angry. But our hero only ignored the Count's request and went towards the dragon. But the Count again did not want to do this. The squad even considered knocking him out, but he noticed it again. Of course, they were upset, but the same girl with red hair appeared. She was holding something in her hands, which made our protagonist very happy. By this point, the knights were also running low, unable to dodge the dragon's attacks. The dragon threw one knight up to make it easier to eat, but unfortunately, it didn't work out, because our hero's squad appeared. Menchik was glad to see Sean, who said that the Count had accidentally lost consciousness. As soon as they were done, our character noticed the wound on Alita. He thought she was injured, but she admitted that she was fine, just didn't mind that the dragon's body was so tough. Our Sean just got up and said that normal attacks just wouldn't work on dragons. They needed to strip off his scales first. But as soon as our character said this, the dragon just started running away from them. All this made our protagonist stand up in a stupor. Sure enough, after everyone left puzzled, the attack of the second coming cult of Shihan came to an end. All the heretics were tied up. They were very unhappy, but the knights tried to calm them down. Of course, our protagonist also noticed that they should have finished long ago. So even Alita read out that their side had taken a lot of damage from the ambush, but there were only about 600 people left in the squad. They were even lucky that the Count didn't remember anything. Alita noticed that it had been 3 days since they left the village. Didn't that mean that the suppression of the cultists was over? Sean only said that they had achieved some results, so the operation could be considered a success, but that was not their main goal, because now somewhere the dragon is hiding and licking its wounds. At the same time, we can notice that the dragon is sleeping in its cave and has stopped obeying the orders of the very head of the cult. The head was shouting at him, asking what had happened 4 days ago. Is it really impossible for this person to avenge his punishment now? Of course, he knew that if he had the ability of a dragon, he would definitely have gotten rid of the pursuers long ago. He would even be able to get rid of the scoundrels from the Blue Tower, and then he would live a luxurious life with the money of the Shihan Church. He approached the dragon and told him to wake up because he took out another heart, which for some reason caught fire in the hands of this heretic. He was shocked, but for some reason the dragon was already ready to eat the person in front of him. The dragon had somehow destroyed the mind control magic altogether, which made the man worry, but it was too late because he was cornered and was eaten by the dragon. By the time the swordsman and the mage continued to move forward through the forest, they noticed a certain cave, in which the heretic was sitting with the dragon until a certain moment. The swordsman had said that they had done well, because now there were no beasts left in the area to control. But still, the mage was worried about something else. Why was the Count standing behind them? The swordsman and the mage immediately started talking in whispers, saying that the existence of the Earth Dragon and Lakran was incredibly secret information. But at the same time, the Count interrupted them and said something that he had wanted to say for a very long time. He asked why he only had 2 knights in his guard at all, and 4 magicians. Of course, Menchik began to say that you cannot just take mercenaries, because if this happens, they simply will not have the strength to cope with the monsters. The swordsman started shouting that if he wasn't happy with the guards, he should tell them. The Count started whining again, saying that he just wanted more security. However, as soon as the Count calmed down a little, he weighed everything and realized that it would be safer with strong people. So he said that he would take the risk and go together with the swordsman and mage squad, rather than mercenaries. This was all very annoying to the swordsman, but there was nothing he could do, as the time to find the mage as well as Darkon was running out. Our protagonist was also in their squad. He was still in shock, because now in this world they used some strange kind of powders, with which you could get all the information, and people began to use some magic in a different way. Alita, as well as our hero, approaching the cave, noticed that something was wrong. There was definitely someone in the cave. The entire Black Lion squad prepared for battle, but as soon as the dragon came out, everyone noticed that the dragon had gotten bigger. The swordsman thought that it was nothing. Even though he didn't know what had happened, he would still be able to show the true strength of their squad. The swordsman went into battle, but the mage who was standing behind him knew that in the last battle, he didn't have a chance to show off his own magic because they were facing a bunch of monsters. So now was just the perfect time to accumulate as much energy as possible and release everything in one go. Now, many mages as well as swordsmen were rushing towards the Earth Dragon. Zeno knew that this was a well-coordinated team effort, since they were using the knights to defend and the mages to attack, and that interference would be unnecessary. But at the same time, I noticed something strange. They noticed that the monster seemed to be from another world, because all the magic that flew at it just evaporated in the air next to it. It was at this moment that the dragon once again began its attack on all the people below. They were very scared, but the swordsman did not even understand what was happening. The Count was also terrified, and our protagonist was feeling the heat of battle, which could only mean that now the dragon could also injure him, just like the fire wolf. Looking back at the field, he noticed that many had fallen, as the mages had stopped working and turned into useless dummies. The only remaining force is the 3 knights from the Black Lion, so I realized that they might die. He even decided that now was definitely not the time to try to hide something, so he went ahead and filled his sword with mana. Of course, Alita was shocked by this performance, and Zeno knew that they were looking at the technique of fighting saviors from another world, conquering the heavens. Everyone was shocked by such power, but Zeno did not see anything wrong with it, because this technique was invented by saviors from another world to defeat the monsters of the Berserk Emperor. This power was clearly not inferior to others. Our Sean, even in spite of such a performance, understood that his strength was still not enough, that to use the attack in full force, but the only way to win was to break through the dragon's scales. Of course, the Black Lion Knights also couldn't believe that an ordinary mercenary was fighting at the same level as the dragon itself. The swordsman didn't know what to say, but he was sure that there was a person in front of them who was definitely stronger than them, the knights. Zeno, as well as Alita, were sure that they also needed help, and the Count himself seemed to have learned the technique. The dragon, of course, was also not one of the timid 10, which our hero noticed. The dragon decided to use its breath of fire, which the swordsman began to warn about, because this attack will be the strongest. However, despite all the warnings, the dragon's attack was not crowned with success, because the rumble of mountains just went straight ahead. The sword of our protagonist began to absorb absolutely all the energy, after which the dragon just fell to the floor. Sean did it. Of course, there were also consequences in the form of the fact that now everyone is looking at him, that everyone recognized him. But the only thing they said was that they couldn't believe that our protagonist could win the dragon. Everyone was just impressed by the good skills, not by meeting someone who was legendary. Of course, earlier our hero would have killed a dragon in one hit, so he would have already wanted to leave. But as soon as he went a little further, the swordsman asked him if our main character had hidden his skills. After all, the energy, skills, and swordsmanship are on par with the Order of Knights, probably even stronger than them. Sean didn't understand anything, but Zeno had to intervene. He said that his friend just before becoming a mercenary trained only in the mountains, and even more so, it's normal to hide abilities for someone who is older. Everyone just couldn't believe that Zeno was younger than our character. So after saying that, the swordsman just said that he understood now, but Sean was so worried, and he asked for a bigger reward. The swordsman just turned around and said that once everyone returned to the city, everyone would get what they deserved. As soon as the swordsman left, our protagonist thanked Zeno because he saved him. Of course, Zeno at this point asked you not to worry. Your character has contributed too much to his image, so it's not for nothing that he intervened. As Zeno continued to rant, Alita asked Sean if Zeno even knew that our protagonist had lost his power. But our hero only said that when her friends betray her to a very big one, she also won't tell everyone around her, and he told her, because there was no other choice. In any case, Sean breathed a sigh of relief, because everything had gone pretty well. But as soon as he said that, Alita pointed into the distance at the Count who was not himself. Of course, that's when our hero realized that he was in deep. That's how the suppression of the second coming of Shihan cult ended. In the process of taming the dragon, 4 top-ranked magicians lost their lives and 2 knights were in critical condition, but Lakran's body was found in a cave. The mages burned the earth dragon and body with magic to finally erase their existence from the face of the earth. But Sean couldn't figure out how to tell the difference between monsters that disappear after death and those that don't. He realized that something was wrong at that moment, and after all the events, Joldarin's party returned to the village of Zard to join the main group, where they spent the night in the villages and then returned to Jax's kingdom. It was on that night that he, our hero, came to the Count's house. Of course, the Earl didn't really want to let Sean in at first, and it was clear from the look in his eyes that Sean was scared. Our character immediately started yelling at him, and the Count confessed that he saw him as a hero from another world. At this point, our character was just incredibly happy. As soon as they sat down at one table, our protagonist confessed that of course he is not as strong as before. The Count also went on to say that they had run into each other a couple of times, and he remembers very well how he fought during the revolution. So he had doubts, because Sean had less energy. He didn't even know that our character was back in Theranor. Why hide it all? They all knew that they had emerged victorious in this war. There was no longer a need. Or is it just that our hero doesn't want to draw attention to himself anymore? Of course, there was a man sitting in front of him who either didn't want to appear in public, or there were simply enemies left in Theranor. Of course, Sean was very interested in this assumption, so the Count admitted that there were a lot of rumors, for example, that other heroes envied the savior's strength and sent him home by force. But everyone was sure that this was pure fiction. Of course, everything impressed our main character, because just from the fact that he hides his identity, the Count almost completely built up a picture of what was happening. And why would such a smart person be credited with the mind of a beast? So it was at this point that our character decided to ask, what would the Count do if all these rumors turned out to be true? Of course, the Count understood that Jackson and Shihan were allies. Nothing would happen if he remained on the side of his king. But if our hero was really betrayed, then he would take revenge at all costs. But why is our Sean hiding at all? Is it really beyond the power of even a savior from another world to cope with 6 heroes? What will happen to the one who revealed his identity? All these thoughts made the Count incredibly intimidated. He begged for mercy, fell to his knees, which surprised Sean very much. But the Count continued to talk about how he had people to take care of. However, it was at this moment that our hero understood why the person in front of him was called with an animal mind, because the Count's brain simply turns off at the sight of danger, and the talent is activated when it is completely safe. So he sat in his pants while they fought with the Empire. It was at this point that our hero told him to get up because he wasn't even going to kill him. The Count was absolutely delighted with this information. He cried tears of joy, even said that if he was left alive, it would serve very well. No one would know anything. Of course, our character understood that you can't just let go of the Count, so he charged his attack and immediately hit the Count in the stomach. The Count started to scream at first, but only then realized that he couldn't feel anything, so what had Sean done to him? However, the only thing our protagonist said was that it was an explosive aura. The Count was shocked because when using the explosive aura, the combat energy is implanted in the body, and you can blow up the person on whom it was used at any time. This was a unique skill of the savior from another world. Of course, Sean admitted that it has its drawbacks, but it was still an incredibly good skill, because now the Count's life is in the hands of our main character. He even warned that this spell removes only when the Count can be trusted. The Count immediately let out a sigh of relief, which immediately made our protagonist wonder, after all, did the Count not hear anything? But the Count only smiled and said that he had heard everything. But as long as he obeyed, nothing would happen. He would do whatever Shihan ordered. Our character warned that the Count would now betray his king, but the Count was not at all worried, because he knew that it was even better to choose the savior of their kingdom than to choose the destroyer of the earth. It was already evening. Our main character returned to the house where Alita was waiting for him. She noticed that most likely the conversation was successful. Of course, she was shocked to hear that Sean was able to use the explosive aura spell, but our character just smiled and said that it doesn't matter if you are weak or not, because there is no such ability as explosive aura. It would be too much for a savior from another world. Alita shouted that she had read about it in books, to which Sean replied that he had deliberately spread this rumor. Alita felt deceived, but at the same moment our hero asked that there were still some questions that needed to be solved. For example, what kind of dragon was this earth, because it was like the same firewolf? Where did Theranor so many special monsters from other worlds come from in Theranor? Everyone understood that there was something wrong, but Alita said that she was also worried about something, or rather the black powder that was used during the interrogation, to which Sean said that he also did not understand anything. But Alita admitted that she was also talking about something else, because when using the powder made her feel strange, as if dozens of insects were crawling in her body, and she could barely hold back her tears. At the same time, we see Lilstein, who continues to conduct experiments on people with the same powder. He makes them kill themselves or kill their neighbors. But after the experience has passed, he realized that even with suppressed instincts, people cannot commit suicide. This was the maximum amount of powder reached, so at the same time I just took and burned the bodies. At this point, we are once again transported to the capital city of Latincell, where Jackson listened to reports that everyone met the Dragon of Earth, that he was so strong that even some knights of the Order of the Black Lion were simply killed. Of course, the Count concealed several factors about the Ivory Tower, or our protagonist. The king was just furious, because he also wanted to go fight against the dragon, but still does not blame the Count for this. The same knights who were standing behind the king also discussed everything they saw with their own eyes. They discussed our protagonist's squad that they would like to call them to the order, but it seems that they have already become knights of the Count. Of course, the knights were upset, because it was like our heroes loved money more than honor. Once again, we have the capital city of Latincell, the Count's mansion. The Count said that he did everything that was asked of him, so now our protagonist has a position, money, and also a house. Our hero asked if he should do something to make everything work out, maybe take a knee. But the Count said that it was enough for him to be their leader in public, but also asked if Shihan was going to kill their king. Of course, Shihan laughed at this and said that even if he had devalued the friendship and everything they had been through, he was still a friend to the end, without sending him home unassembled, so our character was sure that he would not kill him. We see that Jackson approached Saffron during some battle, saying that the battle was over. They discussed what had happened, that the berserker they were fighting against was not happy with such a knife in the back, that in fact everyone was using them. But Jackson only calmed Saffron down, saying that no one cares about blood anymore when power is at stake. Jackson only asked his comrade to take life more simply. Of course, Saffron wanted to say something, but Jackson said at the same time that he never thought about anything great, because it was Saffron who thinks with his head, and Jackson only waves his sword. Of course, what Saffron wanted to ask next was what would happen if Berserk fell. Then who would rule Theranor, because they would need a new king. But it was Jackson who thought that Shihan should become the new ruler, because he is excellent but does not even think about returning to Earth. However, as soon as Jackson said that, Saffron asked if they would still be friends. Jackson he was shocked, and Saffron continued, saying that even the patriotic Grand Duke Groose was betrayed by his brother and lost his head. But will everything change if Shihan comes to rule? That's how this video ends. If you have sat through to the end, please don't forget to press the subscribe button and leave feedback. See you in the next video.